Hey guys, it's Mathel here once again, and for the past few days I have been playing and testing a Poison Spectral Throw Pathfinder, as there are quite a few updates with the Pathfinder Poison passives and the Delve Fossil crafting system. Plenty of new stuff to play around with for Poison characters, and as you guys should know by now I suppose, Poison Spectral Throw is a build that I've done several times on various different iterations and attempts, and it is one of my favorite versions of Spectral Throw. In the past, Dream Feather with its double dipping and high amounts of evasion was probably the most successful one I had done, and since then double dipping has been killed, Dream Feather has been killed, and many different ways of scaling Poison Spectral Throw and Poison attack builds in general were revamped. At this point, this may possibly be the highest damage version of Poison Spectral Throw I have played, including the Dream Feather version. There is a lot less ramp time during the trash clears, and for boss fights it can definitely still be pretty damn quick with the Vile Spectral Throw addition. At this point it hits very hard and just mechanically gets a lot of your poison stacks going early, but in the long term for really heavy boss fights it might still be a bit worse ramp than Spectral Throw with Dream Feather, because back then you could use slower proj to actually get your stacks up a lot faster. You can't really justify slower proj in a setup like this one because it doesn't actually give you additional poison damage anymore. But you should be able to see that the clear here is extremely efficient and nice, especially with the Vile Spectral Throws thrown in every now and again. This is an example on a Double Beyond map with the Pathfinder Poison Prolif. You can clean up packs extremely efficiently, especially the Beyond ones, where the poisons just jump from target to target even as they spawn new ones, and then that just melts things even as they spawn. As well as that, I do have some clips from 300 plus delves, so this is level 83 style delves, and my previous poison character, the Toxic Rain one, was fine, but it does start to feel a bit, slow for this type of delve scenario. This one never really started to feel slow. I do have some pretty finely tuned gear, which I'll show you in a few minutes, but the delve clear actually ended up feeling pretty damn good, and probably one of my better delve clearers, as I very rarely died in these delves, including the harder biomes that I've got on my current map, the Abyssal City ones, with several terrible map mods. But the playstyle of Spectral Throw and Whirling Blades is one that I have loved and probably been my favorite type of playstyle for a long time, simply because you get to jump around a lot, managing to evade most of the enemy attacks that you really want to, while throwing out your Spectral Throws and then collecting your damage a little bit later. And it's just one of the most satisfying playstyles, but also one of the best defensive playstyles, because the character isn't super defensive. It's got something like 5,600 life at the moment, 30% evasion and 30% dodge, and decent little bit of life recovery through life leech and life gain on hit, but it feels so much more defensive than some of my other tankier characters, simply because you have a very avoid based playstyle and you're very quick on your feet. So yeah, these sorts of Abyssal City biomes do go down pretty nicely, but you can start to feel some of the poison ramp being a bit slow in the later stages. Up until that point, it's been very smooth and has just been amazing. And I've also tried out Blade Flurry just a little bit, not too much at this point, just for like one map or two. And I do plan to explore Blade Flurry a bit further for boss fighting, especially Uber Elder and the Tier 16 Guardians, because Blade Flurry to me at this point seems like it's a little bit slower on the map clear, a little less satisfying on the map clear, but quite potentially much better ramp on your poison single target, and probably going to be eventually safer for some of these bosses, because the way that Spectral Throw single target works is it takes a bit of time to ramp, and since you can't slow a proj, you definitely have to stand back a bit more and position yourself better and target the enemies better. As with an example of this tier 12 Red Elder, you have to really position yourself nicely for this type of thing to work. Otherwise, you won't get your efficient stacks going, you won't get your real sort of damage happening that the Spectral Throw could potentially give out. The Vile Spectral Throw itself, though, is completely insane for the 3 charges you get to use it for, as seen here at the end of the Elder fight. If you stack up a few Wither stacks, then slam your Val Spectral Throw. You can see that the ramp is extremely fast on the poison compared to the regular Spectral Throw ramp. It's a shame we don't get more charges, and you can't really mechanically use Val Spectral Throw as your regular type of Spectral Throw as a Blessed Hammer style thing, but that is what it is. So you can see it gets me into some sort of trouble on the Hydra fight when I have to try and back off and attack from more of a distance, and that means I just get hit by balls more because I'm focusing on two things at once, avoiding the Hydra attacks as well as the balls. But it's not too much of a problem, and I did do all of these Guardians in the end deathless, but Uber Elder itself was a bit of a different scenario. So the ramp here, it's a little bit slow and a bit dangerous when attacking and standing still to those tornadoes, since there was a bit of a nasty map mod here. But otherwise, it does take care of most of these Guardians just fine, and the playstyle is definitely a bit more awkward than the traditional slower proj Spectral Throws for boss fighting that we currently do. And as I said, I have not yet tried out Blade Flurry for these bosses or Guardians or even Uber Elder, and I do have a sneaking suspicion it's going to be pretty fast for the ramp, and that's probably what I'll have up for you guys for the next video in a couple of days. So I did do Uber Elder on this character one time as well. It was a pretty big struggle because I messed up a few times, and it's still kind of figuring out the ramp sort of system, how I'm supposed to be doing it, but I did do it, died like 3 times or something, and hopefully I will do another run with Spectral Throw just a bit cleaner, and then another run with a Blade Flurry to see the difference. But Poison Pathfinder with claws is definitely something that's pretty strong at the moment, and let me go ahead and show you how I built it. So here's the character, ST Deliveries, just a Pathfinder, currently level 91, and at this point it took 19 hours to get to this level while doing quite a few deep delves, as well as an entire Uber Elder run and a couple of Elder runs. So pretty fast, but I think that's just the pace of the game at this point. It's also one of probably my favorite little MTX setups I've made recently, just sort of a darker look on a Pathfinder. The claw I'm building around and a new sort of mechanic is the Delve Fossil Claw that you get from Corroded crafting. So that is 60% chance for poisons inflicted with this weapon to deal 100% more damage. So that is quite a meaty mod, and we end up just stacking plain flat chaos damage, bit of flat fizz, but it's mostly flat chaos stacking that then gets converted into poison damage through your passive tree and various passives. So largely the claw is pretty important for this type of large DPS setup, and we craft this by using Corroded, Aberrant, and Metallic. So those 3 combined mean that you are almost guaranteed to get these 2 prefixes just about every single time you roll. After that, you just have to try and get a spare suffix slot so that you can then craft onto the claw cannot change prefixes from Haku, scour the suffixes, and then multimod. If you go about it that way, the claw will cost you 4 exalts to actually metacraft, because you then need to do that suffix scour as well as the multimod. So that's 4 exalts, but the actual initial fossil crafting is pretty cheap because it happens almost all the time, these mods. Otherwise, you can luckily hit some good attack speed, maybe a nulla suffix, and then just get attack speed and crit, or likewise with crit and then attack speed. So you can keep going until you get the holy grail of mods with really good attack speed, but for the main part, it's going to be a lot easier just to invest those 4 exalts with the master crafting system and just get this claw going. So ultimately, pretty easy claw to get going, just takes a bit of currency. And ultimately, Wasp Nest is the one that we've been using for a lot of the poison builds quite recently for Blade Flurries and Spectral Throws, and it still does hold up very well. Let's say my build currently has 1,000,000 DPS with this thing. Just putting Wasp Nest in 1-for-1, which is a 1 chaos item, will give you about 700,000 DPS. So it's still a very large amount of damage, but the point is that this thing can take you to a slightly higher level, whereas you don't really have much progression point past a Wasp Nest otherwise. So it is worth crafting one of these, but you definitely don't have to. You can get by on a Wasp Nest and just do a cheaper version once again, as I have done in the past. I am comboing it with a Lycosidae so that you don't have to worry about any sort of accuracy, you're always at 100% chance to hit, and that does make your crit just a little bit easier and simpler to fill out. Of course, running a danger bait because it is just way too strong for poison to ignore, and that means that my current sockets are Spectral Throw, GMP, Vile Toxins, Deadly Ailments, Unbound Ailments, and Added Chaos. Now, once again, like I said, it's basically all of our damage coming from Added Chaos sort of interactions. So you definitely want Added Chaos as one of your first supports. And when we go for actual single target, we swap GMP for Void Manipulation. And that's also one of the strengths of the Blade Flurry side of things here, because with Blade Flurry, you'd replace Spectral Throw here, and you just have 5 good damage supports. You don't have to worry about a utility like GMP, though you can probably run increased area for mapping over Unbound if you want, but Blade Flurry works really well for clear as well, just a little worse on some certain types of maps. So that's why I do Spectral Throw almost exclusively, and I wanted to play Spectral Throw again instead of Blade Flurry, but I will definitely test more Blade Flurry for you guys in the next day or two. The other interesting stuff in the build is the Fossil Crafted Helm over here that has the -9 Chaos Res aura. So that comes from Aberrant Fossils, I believe, Chaos Fossils. You then craft those with Prime until you hit a good life roll, so just life and minus Chaos Resist, and it's pretty strong for extra damage there. And then we also Fossil Crafted one of these for, I think, Aberrant as well, that gives you Chaos damage. And then you can get a good poison roll if you use Elder Gloves. Ideally, you can get a poison roll that does increased poison duration, so that'd be even better. This is the best roll I got after like 10 crafts, and I decided to stick with it because it is pretty nice. You can also once again Fossil Craft with Aberrant on a Stygian belt that gives you increased Chaos damage, and ideally you get reduced flask charges used, but just life Chaos damage. This one seemed pretty good, so I kept that. As you can see, another subterranean mod there. And then for the rings, you just try and get yourself some added Chaos damage, some physical damage. This ring was just a piece of shit crafted multi-modded one that you could find on the ground that I managed to aug regal with some life and resist, so I decided to just keep that one. That one just has some Chaos damage, some physical, life, and resist. And then likewise, for an amulet, you want some physical, some multi, and some Chaos damage. So multi is somewhat important to us because we're using Corralitos, which gives you perfect agony over here, which means that your critical multiplier also applies to your damage over time. So crit and crit multi end up being pretty important, which is why we are a crit based build using the claw crit nodes and crit multi wherever we can get it. And Corralitos becomes insanely strong for the build because of the poison duration and the fact that it also gives you perfect agony. So you can see in our calculations currently, let's say my Spectral Throw is doing 1,000,000 damage, which it roughly is per tick once I have 10 wither stacks up. Take away Corralitos, you got yourself half of your current damage. That's because of the duration and also the perfect agony. The build is a Pathfinder, so it does mean that sustaining your flasks is a lot easier. And one other thing to mention that a lot of people seem to have missed so far is that Pathfinder does have poison prolif. So it says when you kill a poisoned enemy during any flask effect, nearby enemies are poisoned. So that does mean that your poison spreads similar to how a Bino's prolif used to work, and it does make killing with a Spectral Throw or a Blade Flurry that much better, that much easier, and that much more efficient. And lastly, you do also gain that poisons you inflict during any flask effect have 40% chance to deal 100% more damage. So that's what makes it competitive with the Assassin. And for the actual claw, as you can see here, you do have to import that line of text from the Pathfinder node into your path of building onto your claw if you want to have the same calculation going, because when you currently import that fossil mod, that's what it does. It just gives you a red line of text and it doesn't actually add DPS to your build. So that's what it looks like without the fossil mod, just 700,000 damage. Once you import or copy and then paste, edit it yourself. So you have to just go to the edit over here, and type that in manually, similar to how the flask mod works on the Pathfinder, you then gain all of that damage, and you can actually see your real damage with that fossil mod. If you just put a wasp nest on, as you can see, 800,000 damage, still pretty respectable. And the blade flurry side of things, released at 6 stages, is 2.5 million with the wasp nest, while with the good claw 3.4. So it's quite a lot of damage, and it is pretty ridiculous to be hitting these numbers, but it's all about the ramp, and it's all about getting your wither stacks up with your totem. So you do have your wither totem. You have to place it pretty strategically against certain fights, behind bosses, off screen a bit, and once it stacks, it gets you huge amounts of extra cast damage, and I don't see a real practical use for the withered projectile. I don't think I have it with me. Withered touch, whatever it is, the one that stacks withering from support gem in this type of build, because you can use it with barrage totem on the bow type of stuff. With this, you might be able to attach it to your heralds. So we've got Herald of Purity and Herald of Agony. You might be able to attach it to either. I have tried it. Doesn't stack very fast. It's all about wither in this scenario, I think. And probably the best way to go about stacking wither is wither totem with increased duration, spell totem, and faster casting. So do have Herald of Agony attached to faster attacks, vicious proj, damage on full life. He helps you clear quite a bit on the slower type of things. So once you're sometimes not clearing super fast with your Spectral throw, he'll come in and one-shot things. And then I do have the Herald of Purity, which is just a bunch of extra physical damage and some good tankiness coming from the minions. Besides that, we have Blood Rage, Summon Stone Golem. Your movement support is Whirling Blades, faster attacks, Blood Magic, and Fortify. And then over here, just Vile Haste, as well as a Void Manipulation ready to swap over there. Do also use a Witchfire Brew Flask. You can use some other stuff like a Unholy Might Flask. Can't quite remember the name of it, but yeah, that's only really good if you have lots of physical damage, which we don't have. You can see most of my damage there is chaos, and we are of course immune to both reflect types, Ellie, and physical. Not too much else to mention, don't think. The first few points you grab are definitely these. They are the biggest damage nodes you will get by far. You can level up with Mortem Morsus. They help a very big amount for poison damage early on and scaling. And the passive tree is pretty straightforward. I think you just go through here into the shadow tree early on, start filling out your crits so that you can actually get Corralitos on and actually start using it as soon as possible. You can also drop these two nodes and grab the immune to ailments node if you would rather. That does free up a flask slot and or a flask immunity slot, and probably make you a bit safer against most content, but just want to be fast, so there it is. So that's all I got to say about the build for now, guys. I will be trying out with Blade Flurry in the end game content as well. I'd say this is one of the stronger versions of Poison I've done in recent memory. You can get a bit more life, and I will be hitting about 5,800 by the time I'm done. Not quite 6k, but that's about as good as I can do with the gear and the type of setup I'm trying to make, while still maintaining some good damage. So thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you try out a Pathfinder with some poison in some version. It's pretty damn fun, and I'll see you guys next time.